I am Bonnie Jo Campbell, and I am a fiction writer. I've written 3 books of short stories, 3 novels. My book, Once Upon a River, got made into a feature film. I grew up in Comstock, Michigan, just outside Kalamazoo, on a little bitty farm with my mother and 4 siblings. I grew up milking a cow and taking care of pigs and chickens and playing around in the creek. I graduated from Comstock High School in 1980. Didn't really know what to do next. I wanted to write repeatedly throughout my life, maybe at first when I was in high school. But then I learned that writing was a competitive thing, and I thought, oh, I'm not very good. How could I possibly become a writer? I didn't know that I could. I always did everything I could do to have adventures. One summer during college, I joined the circus and traveled with the circus. Many times I just spent the whole summer bicycling in Europe or wherever I could. Having adventures seemed like the best way to become a writer. But then I read Carolyn Schute's book, The Beans of Egypt, Maine, which is about a poor family of kind of crazy people who did not fit into the establishment. Something in that woke me up because I said, oh, you can write that? And when I learned that you could write about your neighborhood and your community, then I realized maybe I had something to say. I've traveled a lot. I've tried to write while I travel, but what I found is that I write best right here in my own home community, being able to look at the river while I write. I write every day, 7 days a week. Often I'll write a poem first, or I'll work on a poem I've been writing. I'll work on some crazy new essay. It's sort of like doing a little exercise before I get to my real work, which is this meaty story. I've written a lot more short stories than I have novels, and the way a short story appears in my world is that there's some real life situation that's worrying me. And so what I'll do is find a way to work on that issue and that situation using characters. I'll change the character and I'll change the situation, and all I try to do is move forward. I don't start with an outline. I don't know what's going to happen. I like to write about people who are not usually in the limelight, people whose lives might be overlooked. For example, I am very likely to write about someone who would work at the gas station. And people have told me that, oh, I've been to the gas station every week for my whole life, and I never thought about the life of the person who is waiting on me at the gas station. I guess I also like when people tell me that I made them see people in a different way. The novel Q Road is about pressures in a farm community, the pressures of development, the pressures of trying not to fail. My new novel, The Waters, is a little bit more of an epic. It's about 3 generations of women who live on a swamp island, also being pressured from the outside that wants them to change and live a more standard kind of life. My second novel was Once Upon a River, and that is that's the adventure story of a female Huckleberry Finn who has to take off onto the river and make her way alone. I wanted to write a story of a young woman's adventure in nature, the kinds of adventures and special difficulties of being a young woman on her own in the world. There was nothing for the girls who wanted to be Huck Finn, so I gave her Annie Oakley's skill with the shotgun and rifle. As I was writing Once Upon a River, there's a big poster over my desk that had Annie Oakley in the circus. You know, I've always been interested in the circus, and Annie Oakley was kind of a circus performer with her skill. And so in the book, Margot also loves Annie Oakley. It was a nice surprise that a young woman director had a vision for turning the book into a movie. Harula Rose has become a friend, and she shared the experience of making the 300-page book into a 160-page script. Harula had an ability to use the tools of filmmaking to produce a miracle. Just by framing a scene or framing a shot, she could do what took me a page and a half to do to show an emotional experience. It's very different than the book. If my book is my child, went off and became a slightly different person than the one I raised, and that's fine. Some people just grew up with myths and stories that made sense to them. I grew up without a myth, I think. I needed to make my own myth. This mythologist, Sharon Blackie, she says, contrary to what we think, all myth is local. I think as writers, we create local myths. So we use our own characters and our own settings, and we try to create something universal. And that's our project.